Welcome to the next episode of Brandland. I am your host, Garrett Justice, and today I'm joined by Marin Rowe, who's the senior product marketing manager for Lucid. Marin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Garrett.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to jump into our topic today. So just for those of you who aren't aware, Lucidpress has a sister company, part of the same company, sister product, Lucid Chart, and Marin works on that team. And then we have recently launched a new product, and Marin has helped a lot on leading the go-to-market for that. So really excited to dive into this topic today and learn a little bit more about launching this new brand and this new product, and just pick your brain on this. But before we do, tell us a little bit more about your background.
Sure. And I'm happy to talk about Lucid Spark today. It's definitely been my whole world, for better or for worse, the last few months and better part of this year, I should say. So happy to be here. But by way of my background, I did my undergrad at the University of Utah and worked for a mid-stage startup in Utah after I graduated, more in a demand gen capacity. I left that to pursue an MBA full-time at Boston College, which is where I kind of made the shift into product marketing through some internships with LogMeIn and Athena Health. And I ultimately went back to LogMeIn upon graduating, was there for a few years working on some of their really strong brands. And then I've been at Lucid now for about 2 years, also in a product marketing capacity. So it's been a fun journey so far.
Awesome. Love it. And so for those who aren't familiar with Lucid overall in the company, tell us a little bit more about Lucid and specifically Lucid Chart too.
Yeah, totally. So those that aren't familiar with Lucid, we have created products that help teams see and build the future. That is our mission. So we started with Lucid Chart. That's been our flagship product up until this point. As many might know, we launched Lucidpress a few years after Lucid Chart, but Lucid Chart is more of a diagramming application. So it helps individuals and teams better understand people, processes, and systems that drive their businesses. So with obviously this shift to remote work and some kind of priorities and customer feedback that we'd gotten, we made the decision this year to build a new product, which is Lucid Spark. So we've been working on that this year. Lucid Spark is a virtual whiteboard application for free-form ideation, group brainstorming, and real-time collaboration across distributed teams. It's great for strategic planning, whether that's OKRs, building product roadmaps, sprint planning, customer journey mapping, all of that good stuff. So I guess just to simplify, if it helps, and you're thinking about a workflow sequentially, you would begin your project planning and ideation in Lucid Spark, and then you would move into Lucid Chart to build out processes and more concrete project or systems documentation. So that's how the products work together.
Makes total sense. I can definitely see, how a product suite with those working together could be used today especially as people are working remote, right? So you can collaborate in real time and work on that ideation piece and then kind of the systems and process and build out. Why else, what was the inspiration for, in addition to that, why now launching Lucid Spark?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing was customer feedback that we've gotten. We have a lot of really passionate and loyal customers to Lucid Chart that have come to us and said, we want, better brainstorming capabilities. We want to be able to vote on ideas. We want teams to be able to collaborate easily. If you're an avid Lucid Chart user, you may kind of realize that it lends itself more to technical teams, and there's so much functionality within Lucid Chart, which is one of the things that makes it great. But if you're really just trying to collaborate with your team and get ideas down on a virtual whiteboard, if you will, we knew that we could build a better experience for that. So again, it was really driven from customer feedback first and foremost, and then obviously with everything that's happened this year, it really just accelerated the timeline for us to build this.
It's awesome. You know, we have pretty separate teams for Lucidpress internally at our company and Lucid Chart and Lucid Spark. And one of the things that I've loved is just being able to have a front row seat to the awesome marketing work that your team is working on. I love that, you know, you kind of talked about this vision or this mission of helping teams see and build the future. And I love that Lucid Spark together with Lucid Chart just helps to strengthen that story, right? As so many companies today, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you have a technical arm, right? You're doing some sort of technology today. And so having that suite of products together like that, where you can ideate and brainstorm and then bring it in and start building it out, I think it makes total sense, especially in this remote world. So I've enjoyed that kind of front row seat of seeing, you know, you and the team build this out even further. You know, so you have led this go-to-market launch for this new brand, new product, new brand. I'm sure that has been just a ton of work the last few months and more, right? Tell us a little bit about some of the most important priorities or considerations that you were top of mind for you as you were building out this new brand of Lucid Spark.
Yeah, totally. We had a lot. So again, it's been a busy summer and a busy couple of quarters for us. But some of the considerations that we were dealing with was, again, first and foremost, differentiating ourselves from the Lucid Chart brand, while also building out what we're now calling the Lucid Visual Collaboration Suite. So we wanted these products to work very seamlessly together, and you know, obviously the brand goes into that, but we wanted it to be a differentiated experience so that, you know, for all of our customers that have been actively using Lucid Chart, there's a clear definition and separation as to when you would use one or the other, and give them each their own brand identity. In addition, we had to differentiate ourselves from competitors. So we have a couple of really established competitors in this market. It's great that they've proved that there is a market need for this, so we are grateful for them in that regard. But we needed to make sure that we were separating ourselves from the competition. In addition to that, we've kind of adopted a new strategy in who we're building for. So I mentioned, you know, that we're building for teams to be able to see and build the future, but with that, we're really building for teams that create and implement software. So I like what you said, that every company has a technology arm. I read something once that said, you know, every company now is a technology company. And I do think that's so true. So we're really trying to lend ourselves and help those teams that are really pushing forward the technology initiatives within their own organizations. And then obviously with all this going on, we needed to build a cohesive brand experience from end to end. So when launching a new brand, you know, we had to take it all the way from social posts and digital ads to where someone would land on our website, to then getting into the product itself and making sure that there's really a cohesive experience throughout that whole journey for whether it be an existing Lucid Chart customer or a net new user that's not familiar with any of our Lucid products. So
Yeah.
a lot of priorities to balance here, but you know, I think we got it done.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's so much. I mean, not only is it just launching a new brand, new product for the first time, but those considerations of how this interacts with another brand and another product that we already have. Is it differentiated enough, but is it still seamless experience? Like I do want to dive in and talk a little bit more about, you know, you mentioned that cohesive brand experience and building out those assets and steps along the way. But before I do, I'm curious, just, you know, with so many things to think about, right? The consideration of brand new product, new brand. How does it fit in with this other brand and suite of products? You talked about competition, you know, thinking about all of those different things to consider. If you were to think back now and go back in time and kind of give yourself some advice when you were first starting off on this journey, what would that be? Like what type of things have you learned through this process? And I know, you know, this brand has recently launched and you probably still feel like you're in that phase, but what would that advice be that you would give yourself today if you were just starting out?
This is going to sound really cliche, Garrett, but I would say to have fun with it. I think it's easy to get bogged down in, we've got to check all of these boxes, and we've got to, like you said, differentiate ourselves from, existing products and competitors. And one thing that I didn't mention is we have a very strong self-serve, freemium model to our business, but we also serve, Fortune 500 companies. So we had to make sure that we're building a brand that, is fun and playful and lively, but isn't too much that way that our big enterprise customers are going to be like, this doesn't suit our needs.
Yeah.
This seems, too juvenile, I guess, if you will. So again, I think it's easy to get bogged down in trying to check all of these boxes. But I would say have fun with it. I mean, it was an incredible project to work on, and, building a brand from the ground up and really getting to shape, how it comes to life in all of these different areas, really was incredible, and was really fun to do when you kind of could take a step back and look at it through that lens instead of just, we've got to check all the boxes.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great advice. I mean, I think that, if you're in marketing, launching a new brand like this has just got to be, like one of those dream projects, like so exciting, so fun to work on, so stretching at the same time. But I love that advice too, because I think sometimes we can over engineer it, right? Like we can overthink it, and just taking a step back and saying, you know what? I have a pulse on this. Yes, there's things we need to consider, but like, let's just have fun. Let's just go for it and enjoy the things we learn along the way. I think that's awesome advice. So great. Love it. Well, shifting into what you talked about before, then you mentioned building this cohesive brand experience end to end, right? How did you do that? What really worked well in that process?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that, again, we built this really quickly, and we were building the product and the brand in parallel paths. So I should preface all of my answers with that a lot of times you build the product and then you build the brand based on what that product comes to be. But again, we were releasing this this year. It was a huge priority for the organization to do so. So we had to be building in parallel paths. So, that was both an opportunity and I would say a challenge. But what worked well in doing that was we started by building two assets that I feel like became our kind of brand books of scripture, if you will. One of them was a brand guide. So most marketers are familiar with a brand guide. It contains everything from brand colors to typeface to image style, brand characteristics, and when you should use those and how much. So that was obviously a lot of alignment between coordination, brand, creative, and our UX teams, because again, we wanted this to carry not only from first customer or user touch point, but all the way through to the product experience itself. And then that second asset was a messaging playbook. So this was designed more for content, creative, demand gen. Even our sales enablement team has worked off of this asset, but really just kind of going through like, what are our messaging pillars? What are value statements? What features and functionality, are hitting those different value statements and would resonate with certain personas or customer groups, if you will. And I think with those two assets, both kind of on the creative side as well as the messaging side, it really helped to kind of have those to ground the team. And then with that, we held to those brand characteristics every step of the way, all the way up to launch. And then obviously we're still building and executing on this brand and this product. So we're still making decisions every single day that we're referring back to, these guides to help us make those decisions and make sure that, all of our buttons are the same color, or that, things are in the right place in the product and we're using the right imagery or the right tone. So it's a constant work in progress, and I don't think you're ever done, even when you launch a brand. But I would say both the brand guide as well as the messaging playbook were super helpful for us.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So hearing that, two takeaways for me that I take from that are: one, make sure you are working in tandem with every group across the organization. I think sometimes, when it's a small company or an established brand that wants to launch a new product or brand, sometimes that can be seen as just like a marketing task, right? And when you stay in your marketing bubble and you don't go outside of that and don't include others across the organization is when you start having some of those inconsistencies. So first, I guess the takeaway that I have is make sure you're on the same page and everyone's bought it. And then two, put a little bit of structure in place. I love that you mentioned those 2 guides that were, again, not just for marketing, but UX was included in there and every other group who kind of had buy-in. And so they could refer back to that to help make decisions along the way. Are there any other takeaways that, from that experience that you would say are learnings that you have?
Yeah, I would say just something that was really impactful to the successful launch of Lucidspark was testing and getting feedback from beta customers. So obviously, we designed these brand elements, we designed the messaging, and it came up with all of that. But you have to still get feedback from who your actual customers are going to be. And there were a lot of times when we had to get out of our own way and listen to the feedback that we were getting from our users. I think a lot of times if something makes sense to us, but it's not intuitive and delightful for our customers, then it's not right. And with marketing, it's easy to get attached to the things you create. You spend so much time on these assets. But if it's not performing or it's not clearly communicating the value that you want to provide to prospects and customers, again, it's not right. So I always say that you can't be sentimental in marketing. You have to know when to move on, and the data will tell you when to do that. So testing was huge for us as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think, in a project like this, that's so big, so much work that needs to be done, so fast that it could be easy and natural to want to just go heads down and just crank on things. So I love that you mentioned that because I think it's crucial, so important when you're going through this process to make sure you're including customers every step of the way and you're building something that's going to resonate for them. And it's going to resonate before you even launch because you've gotten all that feedback all along the way, right? It's not a launch and cross your fingers and say a little prayer. You already have that validation along the way. And I think that's, how it's been successful for you so far.
Yeah. And honestly, that's one of Lucid's strengths. I have never been at an organization that A/B tests as much as Lucid does, which is great. I mean, I think it speaks a lot to Lucid's character and kind of personality as a company. We're very data driven, but it's constantly giving us, new insights, and we're iterating and testing and forcing us to be nimble and improve, every step of the way. Again, it's not just like we put this out to market and then I get to take a 4-week vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that constant testing really has been so impactful for us.
Yeah, that's great. Love it. Okay. So you talked a little bit about just this, challenge or opportunity you saw to launch this new product and brand and some of that background and experience, what it looked like internally working there. Tell me just a little bit more then about what did you do specifically on the go-to-market side from a marketing standpoint to really make a splash and come out, big with a big lightning strike? Hey, we're here. We have this new brand. We have this new product. So give me some flavor of that. What you did on the marketing side to kind of plan in that launch.
Yeah, for sure. So as far as building a go-to-market plan goes, we had to think about all the various touch points and assets that we needed to create. So again, there's those initial launch assets where you think of like a press release, and we launched it on Product Hunt, and we built a brand new website. Well, effectively, we built 2 websites because we completely revamped the Lucid website to now include this new story that we're out telling, as well as everything from social media posts to digital ads, to search ads, to videos that we're running on YouTube. There's all of these like initial kind of brand awareness assets that we came out with when we launched the product. But then you have to think, okay, now that we've actually gotten users in the product, we need to still service them and be communicating with them. So there's everything from email flows, whether that's onboarding emails or what we call transactional emails, which are more like, hey, Garrett, someone's shared a board with you. Do you want to come in and collaborate with them? So there's a lot of different points at which we are interacting with our customers, and we had to think through all of those and make sure all of those different touch points, like I said, aligned with the new brand, with the creative, with the messaging, and, really kind of drives to the value that we want our customers to be getting out of this solution. So there was a lot that went into it, and we just want to make sure that we had, all of our bases covered, that we have a really strong brand presence across many channels, and again, making sure that experience is consistent across all those channels. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we do sell to enterprise customers, so we have a very large sales team that kind of helps out with the assisted side of the business, and we had to train up all of those, reps and customer success managers to make sure that they're well versed in how to speak now to a visual collaboration suite, and not just Lucid Chart that they knew and love prior to October 6th. So a lot of moving parts, again, from both the kind of self-serve and what we call assisted, but more of the sales side of our business. But again, making sure that everything is consistent across all of those touch points.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sounds like a ton of work. But, one takeaway that, I kind of pull from that is you glossed over it just quickly. And we talked about it a little bit earlier in our conversation today, but you talked about, aligning the story. And I think that's so important, that I think often as marketers, we can get caught up in the tactics, the channels, the creating the email sequences and this press release and that thing, right? But what I really like that you talked about is once you had solidified that brand and some of the visual identity and the story component and some of the messaging that flows with that, it was then everything flowed out of that, right? And everything had that same consistent messaging and story across all of it. It gets a lot easier to be consistent when you have a unifying story first and then start cranking on the assets and the channels. Is that right?
Yeah, that's so important. And, again, I'm a product marketer, so as any product marketer knows, storytelling is so important in our business. And, it's not enough to just be able to go out with kind of like a feature dump and say, like, we can do this, we can do that. If you can't help your prospects or customers piece together these features and understand how your product plugs into their workflow and really improves, their day-to-day life, whether that's a B2B or a B2C product, you're not going to be successful. So yeah, you had to kind of start with that overarching story and then make sure that everything plugs into that as you're going along.
Yeah, I love it. I also come from that product marketing background. And so, I'm biased too, but I think that there's a big misunderstanding when it comes to product marketing out there. It can be very different at lots of different companies. Some companies, it's just sales enablement, or it's just content, or it's product management, right? But I think what you just talked about is one of the most important pieces of, a really strong product marketing person, marketer, or team, right? Being able to really solidify that strategic narrative, that story that then flows through all other touch points, marketing channels, sales teams. And that really is grounded in strong business strategy, right? It needs to be buying all the way up. And I think that that's one of the most valuable things that product marketers can do. So love it. This has been an awesome conversation. As we kind of wrap up here and get to the end, what would be the takeaways for those who are listening, who want to, take something away from this conversation today and go and apply it in their own businesses? What would you recommend they do, or where would you recommend they start?
I would say to take a step back and take an inventory of, again, your end-to-end experience. I know that sounds like a lot, so maybe kind of, split it up into chunks, but put yourself in a customer or prospect's shoes, coming in through, various entry points, whether that's, search ads or, other digital ads or assets. You're coming into the website. Then what do you see? What is the story that you're told on the website? How easy is it for you to kind of move through that funnel and get into, what your product or service or end solution is? And then what is that experience like in your product? Does that story kind of resonate once you get into the product? And is it easy for a user or a customer to see, this product really does solve the need that they were telling me it solves on their website?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it's just so easy to, we want to tell these amazing, great stories, but we need to make sure that the products actually deliver on those, or otherwise, you're not going to have successful customers, and then everyone knows
Yep.
how that goes for business.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, really take inventory of your end-to-end experience. And again, I know that feels overwhelming. So, maybe take it one step at a time, but making sure that you're kind of telling that cohesive story throughout the whole experience and the whole
Yeah.
journey.
Love it. You got to fulfill those promises that you make, right? Like building a brand is really about building trust. So I think that that's an excellent
Exactly.
advice. So, well, Marin, this has been awesome. I really, really appreciate it. As we wrap up today, I want to ask you a question that's, a little bit removed. I often ask, many guests that we have on the show, but what's a common practice or belief in marketing that you just passionately disagree with or are opposed to?
So I don't know if I would say that I passionately disagree with it, but I guess I'm pretty over it. And this is what I'll call the COVID-19 messaging. I cannot
I
handle
agree.
one more email that says, in these unprecedented times. Like for me, it's just like we're no longer living in unprecedented times. Like
Yeah.
these are just the times. This is just the world that we're living in. I think in March, when a lot of companies went remote, I mean, that's when we went remote, was I believe it was March,
Mm-hmm.
lost track of time,
Mm-hmm.
but we were all a bit reactive. No one could have predicted that this global pandemic would settle in and would stay for as long as it has, and no one would predict when it would end. We still don't know when it will end. But even before COVID hit, I feel like there has been this gradual shift in how we work, and I feel like COVID has just accelerated that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the future of work is going to look a lot different, and we should be using this opportunity, these unprecedented times, if you will, to really hone in on what our brands are and the value that we want to deliver to our customers now and going forward. Whether you're in B2B or B2C, obviously my whole world these days is B2B, but I'm still a consumer. So I think the way that that we buy and consume products and subscribe to services, the way we're connecting with colleagues and friends and family, all of that is changing. And I don't think that the businesses or companies are going to go back to that normal that we knew before. I don't think they can afford to. Everyone needs to adapt and finally go digital and find these meaningful new ways that they can interact with their customers. So I don't see us backpedaling when a vaccine comes around or when employees go back into offices, if they even go back into offices at all. I mean, that's still TBD, I feel like. But yeah, I would just say we're no longer living in unprecedented times. The future is now, and we need to build products that solve real problems today and tomorrow so that we're not behind the curve.
Love it. Excellent advice. I completely agree. Quick side note is I gave a couple months ago a presentation for a webinar on brand trust and kind of talked about this a little bit. And I surveyed some people along the way and did some research on this topic, and I was sick of it back then. And so for sure now, we got to move on, and we got to realize we are in the new normal. And so leave that behind and focus on building the future now. I love that advice. So, Marin, this has been so awesome. Thank you again for taking the time today. As we wrap up here, if there are listeners who have questions for you or want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I would say look me up on LinkedIn. So Marin, Rowe, I work at Lucid. Shouldn't be too many of us. So hopefully I'm easy to find. But yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn and mention the podcast, and I'd be happy to chat more with you.
Love it. Marin, thank you so much again, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks. You too, Garrett.